London calling. This is London calling on Longwave. London calling. This is Westminster.
Another number. I am a free man.
Down. I'm okay.
My life is my life.
I'm with a combat unit that's armed with automatic weapons.
Come on, Mrs. Jones. You've got to go to your second job now. You've got to earn extra money to pay the bedroom tax. I'm very lucky. I've got a second job in a chemical plant. Yeah, I'm making fluoride for Syria. They're shipping it to Syria.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to join Chris Everard in an undisclosed location deep under Buckingham Palace in Winston Churchill's war bunker.
Never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
God damn it, boy! These Brits are coming to get us!
Welcome, my friends, to the show which never ends.
My husband and I are not amused.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Deep from inside the former communist bloc, where we now torture American citizens in Poland or Balkan states, we're tuning in to the Chris Everard Show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Everard, and we are broadcasting live on the Truth Frequency. Morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are on our beautiful, fantastic planet. I'd like to welcome you to my show. This is Chris Everard broadcasting live from London, and I have a special guest today, which is Mr. Popeye. And Popeye is one of the heroes who actually informs people every day on his website, which is federaljack.com. And Popeye, can you actually hear me?
Loud and clear, Chris.
That's great. I'm actually on federaljack.com right now. And if any of the listeners have never been to Popeye's site, it's a wonderful resource of news. And at the moment, we have 2,633,191 people have visited federaljack.com. It's quite amazing. And you've done a fantastic job, Popeye. Right now, we've got people from Jacksonville, Florida, Chicago, Montreal, from Sweden. There's listeners hitting federaljack.com from the UK. There's people in France. There's people in Woodside, New York, Oak Lawn, Illinois. It's just an amazing resource of news, and you've done a great job.
Thank you.
Now,
I tried to turn it into a repository of info where people, like researchers, would want to go.
Yeah.
Like one-stop shop, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what you've done. It's absolutely amazing. federaljack.com. There's a pop-up box. If you've got a Facebook account, you just click like and you'll go to the Federal Jack Facebook page. And I'd just like to have a little bit of an update with you. There's a lot of European listeners that tune into my show. This show, ladies and gentlemen, is actually being simulcasted right now on medium wave AM from Stirling in Scotland. It's covering an enormous area, including parts of Scandinavia. Sweden, Norway. We've got listeners in Denmark as well who listen on the AM. and we're also being carried by Radio Calabria on FM in Italy as well. And a third of the Italian parliament is in the hands of the Truth Movement. The former leader, Berlusconi, is up on yet another court case. And this one is a very, very serious one. He received a prison sentence just recently. And this new court case, it's really bad. It's underage sex, it's bunga parties, it's, all kind of political scandals, sexual scandals, sending hitmen to Morocco to try and get hold of birth certificates and rewrite birth certificates to, rewrite history and when the birth dates of these young girls actually took place. I mean, it's a dirty, horrible political scandal. And Berlusconi is, of course, a former member of the P2, the P2 Lodge, and he actually has his own Masonic lodge now. And he's getting pretty, old now in his advanced years. It's very likely that this former leader of Italy, a Freemason, somebody that's collaborated with the mafia, and that is on file because mafia informants actually stood up in court and actually said to the judge that Berlusconi and his business associate years ago had said, if you help us, we'll help you, and we'll put ourselves into the hands of the mafia. That was actually said in court in front of a judge. So we know that's verbatim and that's true. And basically what's happened is that there's a people power revolution in Italy. A third of the seats were won by the Truth Movement. It's called the 5-Star Truth Movement. That's led by a comedian called Beppe Grillo. And we can see this week, Ukraine is kicking off. Third week now, naked women in sub-zero temperatures dancing to thrash metal bands in water fountains. The bands are actually, just pumping out this rock music. There's old ladies serving soup 24 hours a day. They're getting piles of logs because they're in sub-zero temperatures. The cold has not kept people away. The Gestapo thug cops went in on Tuesday night and broke up a lot of the barricades, but it did not stop the people. There's more than 1 million Ukrainian people involved in the people power revolution there right now, and people are tweeting new information. There's a lot of exposure going on to do with Putin, the leader of Russia. And what's come out this week is that somebody's got hold of Putin's bank details and he's got $40 billion in cash in the bank. He's richer than Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs of Apple. And this is a big geopolitical tug of war going on in Ukraine. Ukrainian people do not want to be part of the old Russian sort of former Soviet, former communist bloc. They want to be part of the EU superstate. They're going to take their chances and become part of Europe. That means that they're going to become part of NATO. And Ukraine is the gateway for Russia. It controls the Black Sea naval fleet, which means that Russia will lose its military influence over the whole of the Middle East. And that is why there's more than 1 million people on the streets of Ukraine. And that's also why Putin dissolved one of the news agencies. He's actually dissolved an entire news agency to try and stop this people power movement from getting out onto the airwaves in Russia, because it looks really basically as if the freezing cold weather is not going to stop people from going onto the streets, and it could trigger a people power revolution in Russia itself. And that means that basically the days of Putin are going to be over. So this is what is going on in the Ukraine right now. Now, Popeye, on your federaljack.com website, there is an update about Sandy Hook. And for the listeners in Europe, what we kind of saw on the BBC European news feeds was this very, very strange guy who's meant to be the father of one of the children that was killed, kind of laughing and joking and fooling around just seconds before the live cameras went on to him. And then he completely changed his facial expression, and he was almost in tears just a few seconds later. Have you got any updates for the benefit of the European listeners about what is actually, going on in Sandy Hook now? Have any of these people been exposed?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of websites and videos and stuff out there. There's nothing official. I found that it was actually odd in a lot of ways from other anniversaries, because it was just the anniversary, the 1 year anniversary.
Yeah.
The families actually didn't want any media attention whatsoever. They wanted to be left alone, and I mean, if that's a real sentiment from everybody in that town and the family, then I could understand that, and that's fine. I just find it a little weird how there is, and I'm not saying the whole thing was fake and that there wasn't anybody killed or anything like that, but I always look more so at the reaction to things and how they handle it, like if there's a cover up or not, and just the way they reacted to the whole thing. Did you know they leveled the school? It's completely being demolished. I mean,
wow. I did not know that.
Every square inch of it, Chris. And they have fences up around it where, and in the fence they have, they put, it's probably plastic. You can just use, they usually use plastic tarps, and you run it along the fence and you can zip tie it to the fence so it creates like a barrier so you can't see in.
Wow. So now let's get this right. They've demolished the entire school, and they've put a fence around it.
Yeah, and what gets even weirder, all of the debris was pulverized. Okay, every piece of it was pulverized. Anything that couldn't be pulverized on site and had to get carted off to get melted or shredded or whatever was taken off. It was taken off on trucks that were they were tarped down, and the drivers and everybody signed non-disclosure agreements and agreements that if they leaked anything, they would be sued and all this other stuff. So
this is classic destruction of evidence at a crime scene.
Well, that's why I always say you follow, like, in this, especially this specific situation, I tried to break it down into two different things. There's the event itself, and then there's the cover-up. And that's, the way I look at JFK, the way I look at 9/11, the way I look at all this stuff. Because then it's easier to discern, here's the information for the event itself, here's the information for how it was handled. And if I find that when they handle things like this, like pulverizing an entire school and demolishing it, there's something shady about that. I don't know. It just raises a red flag.
I would say that's quite unusual myself. I mean, it only happened, I think it was something like December the 14th last year, was it?
Yesterday was the 1 year anniversary.
Yeah,
and before the 1 year anniversary, they demolished the school. Like, that was fast.
Wow. I mean, it is suspicious, because if you watch those mainstream TV shows like CSI, Crime Scene, there's loads of those types of shows, Forensic, all these types of shows which are really basically mind control, that, they send out a subconscious message like the police are so brilliant and so intelligent, when we know that, there's a lot of bungles done, in investigations. In those crime scene TV shows, you see them using DNA fingerprinting and ultraviolet lights and all this kind of clever stuff where they can go back to the scene of a crime years later, and they can actually apprehend and put charges against someone for a crime done long, long ago. I mean, you see that in Columbo. You see it in a lot of these types of TV shows. To flatten the entire school is just suspicious. It's just totally suspicious.
They have nothing to hide.
I tell you now, I bet you there's a few of my listeners, they're experts at Google Maps and the satellite mapping system. Bing have got their own system now, which is really pretty good. The Bing system is called Bird's Eye View. It's excellent. And, well, I bet you there's people looking at this area right now. I mean, don't you find that there's a kind of parallel to what happened after 9/11? There was a classic BBC documentary. It wasn't about 9/11. It was about architecture, and the presenter Dan Cruikshank went to the scrapyard where the 9/11 debris was all piled up, and he found somebody's shoe with, human remains inside the shoe in amongst the debris where it had just been bulldozed, and they cleared that site as quickly as possible. And I want to say to the listeners that Popeye, he is one of these people that actually has lived right the way through the 9/11 experience, the 9/11 whole, cover up, because that's a cover up the same as Sandy Hook as well. Do you not think, Popeye, that there's some kind of parallel similarities there?
Oh yeah, with the way it was covered up and how it was handled, completely.
Yeah.
When it first happened, when Sandy Hook first happened, I looked at it and I said, I don't want to jump to conclusions, and I was on air that night, so I said right to my listeners, look, don't jump to conclusions, don't everybody, immediately assume that this was something that was staged. It could be a real event that the media twists, because they do that too. They twist the narrative to suit their agenda. So let's everybody calm down. But the more I look at Sandy Hook, and there are other shootings that are, they have the same weirdness and some of the same strangeness, and you're like, okay, this just really seems like it would benefit them to pull this off, as opposed to something real happen, and then they twist it to mold whatever, agenda they have. And the more I look at Sandy Hook, and again, everybody, there was a lot of stuff that was wrong and misinformation that was put out in the first couple, 24, 48, maybe 72 hours.
Yes.
From the alternative media. We, as an alternative media, need to learn from that. Yeah. As the community as a whole, we need to learn how to, gauge what we put out too, so we can learn from that. But the more I look into Sandy Hook, the stranger it gets.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, you can look at this, Chris. You know how I look at things. I look at things with a very logical mind. And man, as much as I try, and I've tried to take the other side and be like, no, it's not a conspiracy. And I've tried to stand that ground and fight it, and you really can't, because there's just too many things that are weird with this shooting. It doesn't mean everything. Every shooting that happens is strange, like the one that just happened. Okay, yeah. You notice they're not really talking about that.
No, that's right. That's right.
So that's why that's probably a real one.
Yeah, that's right. That is a shooting that took place in Colorado, and you're right. There hasn't been the kind of media hoo-ha about it.
Well, he was also a socialist and a supporter of Obama, so.
Oh, I see. Well, let's cut to the chase. Let's say, especially for the benefit of the European listeners, that basically what it seems like is that Sandy Hook was like, if you like, the tip of an iceberg of a propaganda campaign designed to really grab people's arms and leave the police as being the only people who are walking the streets with guns. And of course, that's against the founding fathers and the constitutional aims. One of the founding fathers is a famous quote, I think I published it earlier this week on my Facebook page, is that, what during the era of the founding fathers, their main aim was to have a well-educated, well-disciplined, armed citizenry of America. They wanted discipline, and they wanted people to have guns, but they wanted it all properly done. And the interesting thing is the aristocracy, the European aristocracy, they arm their children to the teeth. A lot of people don't realize this, but, little 7 and 8 year old kids who are members of the aristocracy, they get shotguns for Christmas, and they have wardrobes in their kitchens, in their castles and in their stately homes full of shotguns in the kitchen. with children eating their breakfast, and it's hunting. But obviously those aristocratic families, unfortunately, and you can see this from the pictures of Cameron and the former mayor of London, Boris Johnson, and their mate George Osborne, who just by happens, he became the Chancellor of the Exchequer. One of them became the Prime Minister, and the other guy became the Mayor of London. They're all sitting there in one photo, dressed up as being the Bullingdon Boys, which is like a kind of drinking club where they used to throw up and vomit and everything and be very totally obnoxious. And other members of this group included the sons of the Rothschild banking family. Well, several members of that Bullingdon Boys Club are now running Her Majesty's government. And, they're hunters. The aristocracy hunt, and they use shotguns, and they go hunting with their children. And, they're posing in these photographs. You can tell by the expressions on their faces that they were standing there, and what was going through their minds is like something like, we were born to rule. I mean, democracy is a complete sham, and to take away guns from people is not in keeping with what the constitutional founding fathers of America wanted.
It also hasn't worked.
Yeah.
At all throughout history.
Right.
Like, it's never been effective at getting the guns out of the hands of bad people.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this whole Sandy Hook thing, people just saw, now let's just come back to this guy who's meant to be the father. Laughing and joking within seconds before the, TV cameras were rolling. He completely changed his facial expression. Has there been any response from that man, talking about, there must be 1 billion blogs out there with this clip showing that he was laughing and joking. He's meant to be the father of a child that's just been shot to death, and he's laughing and joking. And then the next second, he goes on camera, all of the mainstream media newsfeed cameras start rolling, and then he's almost on the verge of tears. I mean, has there been any response from himself?
Well, not that I know as of late, but I know that the mainstream media came out in support of some of these people not too long after, a lot of this stuff, where people started researching it and throwing up all the oddities on YouTube or throwing them up on a blog or, wherever. And they came out with stories in defense of these people, not so much attacking this website said this, but they would attack conspiracy theorists are going overboard and, going after the people of Sandy Hook, blah, 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 blah.
Oh, dear. Yeah, I mean, this, if anybody calls me a conspiracy theorist, I take that as a major insult, because the films I make, I'm always trying to go to the source of the information with documents, photos, cine footage, whatever I can get. And just this week, I've managed to get Freedom of Information documents from 1947. And I never actually make anything. I'd never do any broadcast without actually having backed up proof. This conspiracy theorist kind of slur, I think I might be wrong, but I think it came from the Nixon era in the 1970s. Maybe it existed before then.
It actually goes back not too far past that, but it goes back a little bit further, right after the Kennedy assassination. I mean, the term conspiracy theorist has been used before, but the pejorative term, the way they use it, came out of Langley after people started researching the JFK assassination, into like mid 60s to late 60s. People like Mae Brussel and Penn Jones Jr. and others, because the official story of the Kennedy assassination is one lone gunman. So it doesn't matter who the conspiracy is with. It could be the Russians, the Cubans, the mafia. Why do you think they denied when it first happened? And in the 60s, right, when Johnson came in, there was talk of, it was the Russians that did it. It was a Russian conspiracy. And the Johnson administration shut that down, because you could not have the word conspiracy thrown around at all, because anybody researching a conspiracy would eventually trip over some of the lines that connect to this huge, vast web that is the Kennedy assassination conspiracy.
That's right.
It would be shown that there was a conspiracy, so it had to be a lone gunman. So the term conspiracy theorist was a pejorative. Oh, this nutbag over here thinks that there was more than Lee Harvey Oswald that killed the president. Oh, ha, ha, ha. Everybody point fingers and laugh.
Yeah. In actual fact, for the last month, I've deliberately repeated posts on Feed Your Brain magazine. That's my monthly magazine. It's got a page on Facebook. We've got about anywhere between 300,000 and 800,000, or even more than 800,000 some weeks, of visitors. And this last month, I've deliberately been repeating a post with a photograph, a black and white photograph, of a mafia henchman who used to be an associate of Al Capone. His name is Sam Giancana, and he is the man, according to one of the members of this assassination team, who actually pulled the trigger, and it was the bullet from Sam Giancana's rifle that exploded JFK's head. And I've deliberately repeated that post because, you know, the mainstream media, yet again, on the anniversary that's just gone by of the JFK assassination, yet again, the BBC were lying. Okay, now everyone, we have a very short break. This is only 2 minutes. We're going to be back with Popeye. Get on to federaljack.com during this commercial break. And when we get back, we're going to be talking about more amazing stuff. Welcome back. This is Chris Everard broadcasting live from London with my special guest, Mr. Popeye from federaljack.com. And you can capture me at my own personal website, which is christophereverard.com. And there's various links and things on my website. I've put links there for people to send me nice messages. And I get so many death threats and assassination threats. I've put a special link on there so that you can send me a death threat using Yahoo, YouTube, or Twitter. So all of those crazy loony people that say that I'm a monster and, you know, you should never listen to me and everything that I'm saying is rubbish, you can use a special death threat link, and you can, you can even send me a death threat using Twitter. So, federaljack.com. Popeye, can you just tell us, you know, you've obviously been running your site for a long time. You've got something like getting on for nearly 2.7 million people going on to federaljack.com. Is it just you who's running that website?
Well, yeah, I post this stuff. I have a couple people that submit stuff to me.
Well, you're doing really
stuff, but
fantastic work there.
I also have a back team. I have two guys that run my IT stuff on the back end.
Wow!
And if it weren't for them, then I wouldn't. Because we get attacked a lot. But and you know what? you know what? That counter too. It's only like 2.5 years old.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going on 3 years now, I think. The globe on the side, but for 4 years previous, we never had a counter up. So I can't even tell you how many.
Yeah, that's
I can't even tell you how many millions have been there.
Well, when I started on the internet, these sophisticated counter things, they didn't actually exist.
Yeah, that's how it was when we started, too.
That's
they weren't around.
Yeah.
We're old school, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I remember posting up information about the Illuminati on bulletin boards, you know, and doing it all via email before the internet even got started. Right now at federaljack.com, we've got people in Orlando in Florida, people in Ankara, people in Tallinn, people in Scandinavia. And my special guest is Mr. Popeye. Get over to his website because it's an amazing repository of modern news stories. It's federaljack.com. Where did you get the name Federal Jack? What is that a character?
Well, it started off that I always used to say we can just, the federal government can say Federal Reserve. Why can't we say, they call themselves federal? Why can't we say Federal Jack? But that's not the true story of what happened. Long story short, there was a guy that used to run around protests here.
Uh-huh.
He was a Fed, and he used to pretend to be a protester, but he would come and be like, "Oh, we should blow things up," or
"Oh dear,
we should go." Yeah, one of those guys.
Oh dear, that's what you call in French an agent provocateur.
Yes.
And
So-
these guys are paid for. In America, the FBI run the COINTEL Pro program. It's been going for a long time now. It's been going for like 45 years. And they pay these trolls. And there's also cyber versions of these types of people as well.
Well, yes, now, especially in the cyber age, there's a ton of them. And this guy would show up to, protest and stuff. So the guys my two IT guys, they're hackers, and they just threw this page together really quick to oust him. And they called it Federal Jack. Because the name he went by was Jack. And it worked, and the guy stopped showing up to protest and everything else, and everybody quickly figured out who he was. And then we had this domain that everybody was going to, right? Yeah. So they turned it into a news website, and I was a contributor to it, and I ended up crashing their system because I contributed too much stuff. So they just asked me if I would take it over because they couldn't keep up with me.
Well, it's turned into this amazing phenomenon. I mean, right now there's people in Turkey, Poland, the UK. There's people from all over America, Plymouth, Minnesota, Indiana, Florida. It's amazing. Now, just before the break, we did actually discuss a little bit about Lyndon B. Johnson, Sam Giancana, the assassination team. That's what it was, ladies and gentlemen. This thing about one lone gunman killing JFK. I mean, we could have a laugh track on the BBC news reports of the last few weeks. The BBC, the mainstream media are still sticking to this ridiculous story that just one guy high up in a book depository that didn't even have, a close field range with his rifle, with an old-fashioned bolt-action rifle, is responsible for, killing JFK and also putting a bullet into Governor Connolly, who was sitting in front of JFK during that cavalcade. Why does this matter today? Why in the 21st century are we still discussing JFK? Because he was a man that when he was assassinated, they didn't just assassinate the president. They assassinated what he symbolized. He symbolized a new generation on Capitol Hill, and it wasn't just him, it was his brother as well. And they killed JFK, and very shortly afterwards, they killed his brother. When they assassinated Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy, they assassinated not two men, but they assassinated a movement of hope. They assassinated symbols of hope, of regeneration, a breakaway family. I mean, they weren't, innocent butterfly collectors. Nobody in the world of politics is innocent. But they assassinated hope back then. But it has not worked. This is the important thing. It has not worked. What happened after that is that John Lennon, Monsignor Bruce Kent, and many other people moved in. Tony Benn, who's a British aristocrat who turned into a member of parliament. Lots of people took up this place in the political spectrum, offering criticism of the system and offering a new perspective on the old-fashioned political paradigm. And the Warren Commission is a whitewash. That is a whitewash report exactly the same as the 9/11 Commission report is a whitewash of what went on. And the people that fired those bullets are Sam Giancana and a man who's actually in prison right now. He's actually serving life sentences. It's completely separate to the JFK situation, is a man called James Files. And you can actually look it up on the internet. And James Files is a convict. He's in prison right now. He's been in prison for a long time. And what did he have to lose? I mean, he was already a convict. So he actually came out and he confessed to a Dutch journalist, this is a few years ago, that Sam Giancana, who was an associate of Al Capone, who was a mafioso, but he also did work on the side for the CIA. In other words, if people in the CIA at Langley in Virginia, like, say, for example, the former boss, which is George Bush Sr., wanted somebody killed, but the assassination was dirty. In other words, it could have political ramifications if the Bush family were found to be involved, or if the CIA were found to be involved. What they used to do is they used to trot down to a local bar and they used to hire Sam Giancana, a mafioso, an old-style mafioso boss who used to run actually illegal liquor back in the time of Prohibition. And they used to hire the mafia through Sam Giancana, and it was Sam Giancana who put together the assassination squad. Yes, Lee Harvey Oswald was involved. He was most certainly involved. I'm not saying Lee Harvey Oswald is a completely innocent person, but it was Lee Harvey Oswald, James Files, and Sam Giancana, and they were being paid. Get this, ladies and gentlemen, the money was coming from a cartel that met in Texas, Austin, Texas, hotel rooms, and that cartel was providing money to mafia assassins to kill the President of the United States of America. The American dream has never happened. That is an American nightmare. And JFK and RFK, as I say, they were the personal symbols of this hopeful, regenerative movement. Now, Popeye, on federaljack.com, I did notice you've got pictures of a book there called Me and Lee, How I Came to Know, Love, and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald. It's written by a lady called Judith Very Baker. Is that Lee Harvey Oswald's wife?
No, that's his mistress.
Oh, it's his mistress.
Yes, that's not Marina Oswald. Judith was his mistress. He was going to leave. This part's in the book. He was going to leave Marina and marry Judith because he was in love with her. But she was a teenage prodigy that was brought into a program. She thought she was being brought in to help cure cancer.
Yeah.
And this was in the late 1950s, early 60s.
Yeah.
And in reality, she was brought into the program to turn cancer into a bioweapon. And their first victim that they wanted to, well, supposedly, at least this is what they told her, that they were doing it to take out Castro and communism, and it had to be done.
Wow.
And she was 17, so very easily manipulated. But her handler, the guy that was sent to go keep an eye on her, was Lee Harvey Oswald, and
I see.
He ended up falling in love with her.
Wow!
So, and she's got a lot of inside information, and I've interviewed her probably 6-7 times now. Over 20 hours of interviews I've done with her, and I spent a couple of years researching her before I went and actually interviewed her. And she's the real deal. And people like Jim Mars and others have interviewed her, and they all say the same thing, that she's the real deal. In fact, there's a comparison book, or a comparable, whatever you want to call it, companion book. That's the word I'm looking for.
Companion book.
A companion book that goes along with that. It's its own book, but if you put the two together, they go hand in hand. It's written by a guy named Ed Haslam. It's called Dr. Mary's Monkey. He's got an entire chapter in the book all about Judith, but his book explores more about the project that she was a part of, which was the polio vaccines from the 50s were tainted with the SV40 virus, the cancer-causing monkey virus. They knew about it, and they gave them to people anyway because it would have cost them too much to destroy the stocks and then create new vaccines. So they just gave them to people anyway.
Wow. So, if you've just stumbled on this broadcast, I should say to everyone, these are the types of in-depth things that we discuss. You don't hear this type of thing on the mainstream media. I want to say that just because you never hear this kind of depth of detail being discussed about assassinations of political figures doesn't mean it never happened. All right? The mainstream media has lost this digital revolution The people have won this digital revolution, and federaljack.com is one of the most important repositories of this information. So the book that we've just been discussing is called Me and Lee. And so this lady is still around then, Popeye?
Oh yeah, Judith's still around. She has to live over in the EU, and she bounces around from country to country to country every 90 days.
I see.
It's very cloak and daggerish to get in touch with her when she's over there. Only recently she's been able to travel here because she's received more attention over the years, and through my interviews I've done with her, other people's interviews that they've done with her, she's gotten a lot more attention now. So now if something happens to her while she's here, it's a little more obvious.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? There's a certain level of attention and secrecy that they have to work from. It's like
Absolutely.
Deborah Jean Palfrey, the DC madam. If she had said what she knew, they never would have found her hanging in her mother's backyard. And she was told that weeks before, and she said, no, I'll go to court. And people were telling her, you're not going to make it to court. And she didn't.
Well,
But Judith is still alive. They've tried to kill her a few times.
I'm not surprised. There is actually a long list of people that have either been murdered or they've had very close calls, and some of those people are innocent bystanders who actually witnessed the JFK killing. And this isn't a conspiracy theory. You can actually do your research. You can look it up on the internet. There was even a guy on the day who had to go to hospital because a bullet grazed his ear. There was more than one gunman, ladies and gentlemen. Do not believe the mainstream media. This last month, Popeye, I have to say, I am flabbergasted that NBC and ABC and all these people are still trying to fool the public. I find it disgusting myself.
You want to hear something? You want to hear? I was in Dallas, right?
Oh, yeah.
I went there. I drove out to Dallas for the 50th. And that morning, I got up really early, and I put on the news because I wanted to see what kind of propaganda they were going to have. And the local stations around there, one of the local stations was actually playing the old news footage from that day, like him arriving at Love Field, everything. But one of the stations that was covering the events that they were having live, for the 50th, they're at commercial, and I'm standing there, and I've talked about this on air, and I'm trying to find a video of this. If anybody was recording any of the live video feeds from the local stations that day, I know people were. There's got to be somebody out there that did. If you can find this little snippet for me, please let me know, okay? You can email me the full word, contact, dtrh@yahoo.com. That's the full word spelled out, contact, dtrh@yahoo.com. Anyway, I'm watching the news. It comes back in from commercial, Chris, and it says, it's got, this dramatic music, and it's got one of these live shots, and they're panning back of over Dealey Plaza, right? And it's got the flag and everything, and it's the dramatic music, and they're panning back, and out of the into the middle of the screen comes these words, and they get really big, and it says, the big event. And I about fell out of my shoes, because anybody that's ever studied the JFK assassination in detail understands that connects to two things, okay? And this will show you, this is one way Judith Baker is one of the things, it's just one thing that verifies, okay? Back in the 90s, she was interviewed for a series by Nigel Turner called The Men Who Killed Kennedy.
Yeah.
It's actually a 9-part series.
That's right. It's excellent.
Yeah, most of the people think it's only a 3-part series or a 6-part series. Over here, you can only get the first 6 parts. But it's actually a 9-part series. She was in part 8, The Love Affair.
Yeah.
She verifies that Lee told her, one of the last conversations they had before the assassination, he talked to her about 2 days, I think it was, if I remember correctly. It's in the book, before the assassination. And he told her that that's what they called it. Their code name for it was the big event.
That's right.
Well, E. Howard Hunt said the same thing on his deathbed. So that's 2 separate sources saying that. And then I'm in Dallas the morning of the 50th.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
And it says the big event on the TV screen. What do you think? What do you think they were trying to say? Because it was, I'm sure it was the local
I find that
NBC.
kind of thing disgusting, to be honest. I think that is the media rubbing the public's noses in it.
Bam.
You know, I think it's disgusting. I really do. And Governor Connolly, let's get this right. JFK his head was exploded in that car, but Governor Connolly was also injured. A lot of people don't know that. And his testimony does not fit with this ridiculous, single bullet coming from, I think it was the 4th or 5th floor of a book depository. It's ridiculous.
Knew. He was he was in the know that he knew that Kennedy was going to get shot. But, think about what he said when they were shooting at the car. Connolly said, "My God, they're going to kill us all."
Yeah.
I'll repeat that just one more time in case anybody didn't catch that. My God, they're going to kill us all. They're implying more than one.
Absolutely. And not only was there more than one gunman, there was a team of watchers. There was a whole team in the actual crowd in Dealey Plaza. This was all planned, and they were tip-off teams. And
Have you ever heard of a man named Ed Lansdale?
It rings a bell. It rings a bell with me.
His name comes up in different various conspiracy research here and there, but he. I'll send you this video clip and you can check it out. It was put together by a friend of mine, another radio show host named Leno Sanik. He's got a great website. It's an archive for a man named Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. Prouty is the Mr. X character in the Oliver Stone JFK movie.
Yes.
That's Prouty. He's got a whole Len knew him and he was friends with him, and Prouty gave him just a ton of interviews and stuff before he passed away. And it's unfortunate he's Colonel Prouty's not around today, because his intellect and his look on things now would be priceless.
Yeah.
But we can take what he told us and extrapolate from that, looking at modern things that are going on now, and you can still figure out what's going on. You can see. And one of the things everybody says, well, how do you know? Why would Colonel Prouty do this? How they would have killed him? Because he knew. I asked Len this. He knew there was a line that you could draw with a certain amount of information that he could release, and he gave just enough information. Just enough to make people research, and the reason he did so was because he felt that the playing field should be leveled. Anyway, Lansdale, there's this great video that I've got the audio for. In fact, I can shoot it to you, or I can play it, whatever. But I'll give it to you regardless, so you can check it out on your own time.
Okay.
But it talks about who Ed Lansdale was, like what his specialty was, which was overthrowing governments for the CIA. He worked for the CIA. His cover was that he was in the Air Force, but he was always a card-carrying CIA member.
Oh dear.
His specialty was overthrowing governments, and this guy was in charge of. Let me put it to you this way. There's a picture, and Prouty's in this video, he says, look, that's Ed Lansdale. There's a picture of the tramps being marched through Dealey Plaza with the cops.
Yeah.
Well, in that picture, there's a guy walking in the opposite direction, very nonchalantly, not even giving a crap. That guy that's walking nonchalantly in the other direction is Ed Lansdale. Now, what is a guy who works for the CIA, specializing in the overthrow of governments, doing in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963.
Yeah, and also, I have to say to the listeners, if you're not, absolutely au fait with the way the JFK assassination was organized, those three tramps, one of them is thought to be Mr. Hunt. That's right, isn't it? So the actual...
Howard Hunt.
That's right. Howard Hunt was thought to be one of the tramps. These were people that were playing a role within the assassination, dressed as tramps, and they were, taken away, and that's how they left the crime scene. There's also this fascinating man standing there with an umbrella in the middle of Dallas on a hot day, a sunny day, and he's got an umbrella. I think he puts the umbrella up, doesn't he, as some kind of signal or something?
Yeah, he opens it and then closes it. And a lot of people have debated Umbrella Man. Some people think it's no consequence; it's not a big deal.
Well,
Personally, I think the guy could be a signalman.
Yeah, I think so. I think so as well.
And knowing how the military works and knowing that this was pulled off, this whole thing was a joint venture between the CIA, the Mafia, the certain members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and with the Joint Chiefs of Staff come their little special forces minions that work for whoever, So this was a collaborative effort, and they had. I'm even open to the fact that they even brought in outside help, and Prouty talks about this. He says that the government has, and it's not even so much the government, but like we'll say the shadow government. They have in this little island. I think he said it was off of Greece somewhere. That there's this little island that they keep what he called professionals.
Oh,
and
really?
when they need somebody, they just go, come here, we need you, and you come. This is what we need you to do, and then they escort them back to the island. These are guys, obviously, with no family.
Uh-huh.
And
yes.
I mean, if you understand, Kennedy could not leave Dealey Plaza. And if anybody's never been to Dealey Plaza, like I've physically been there, I can tell you it's not an easy shot. I personally think the two shooters, one was there was a team of there were 3 teams at least in Dealey Plaza, and there were backup teams in case they didn't get them on the other side.
Well, that's right. There's quite a few good biographies about mafia bosses, and in the 1900s when the mafia was doing bombings and bombing competitive mafia bosses, they always had a backup. Always they had a backup.
Right, and then working with military guys, that they're going to, you put all those minds together that have experience of doing this, and people forget that they're like, oh, the mafia wouldn't work with the government. Yes, they would. They worked with the CIA plenty of times.
Yeah.
They were pissed off at Bobby Kennedy for going after them. They were like, whoa, what are you doing? We helped get you into office. What are you doing? That's why one of the reasons they were mad at them.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody had a reason to be pissed at them. They were pissed at that. Then you got the CIA pissed at them because Kennedy said, I'm done with you guys. I'm going to scatter you to the winds. Right? The Federal Reserve, he starts printing what they call now Kennedy greenbacks backed by silver. He's going to tell the Federal Reserve to kick rocks. And he was making changes. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Kennedy was a saint. But I think, honestly, Chris, and this is from my research, I've been researching the assassination. This is like one of my specialties. If not my specialty, right? Yeah. I've been researching this for like 20 years. And I think that, he had, obviously he knew he was connected, he was in the know. But I think from his own personal experiences and his initial experiences as president, I believe he wanted to change things for good. And they couldn't let him do that. And they had to kill him.
Absolutely. Now, everyone, stay with us. When we get back, we're going to be talking about Ed Snowden and the NSA listening and spying on 5 billion smartphones. That's in the second hour. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Chris Everard. I'm broadcasting live from London with my special guest is Mr. Popeye from federaljack.com. federaljack.com. And in this second hour of the show, we're going to be discussing the revelations of Ed Snowden, a government whistleblower. And just recently, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Guardian newspaper in Britain have actually been republishing confessions of Mr. Snowden. And on the Enigma channel, that's enigmatv.com, we are going to be broadcasting a series of TV specials called The Snowden Files. And what they do is they simplify all of these amazing revelations from this man who was in the snake pit. He was in the cockpit. He was actually inside the NSA, the National Security Agency. There's also a Pentagon version of the NSA, which a lot of people don't realize. It's like half like the NSA, half like the CIA, and it's called the DIA. That's the Defense Intelligence Agency. And Ed Snowden had access to knowing exactly what was going on. In a nutshell, what Mr. Snowden has revealed to us is that 5 billion, that's billion with a B, 5 billion smartphones every day, every 24 hours are tracked. You're calling your mum. You're getting in your car, you're driving down the road, you're going to go and buy a loaf of bread. They know exactly what's going on. They know who is calling you. They know who you know. They know the people that your friends know. And they're gathering this information, and this information is being passed then to Her Majesty's Government Communications Headquarters. That's a place called GCHQ in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire in the United Kingdom. And the NSA's biggest listening base is actually in the United Kingdom. It's actually not in America. And that's a place called Menwith Hill. And the information is being gathered from these 5 billion smartphones, and it's being processed using special software called Muscular. And that software is funded by Her Majesty's government in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire. Now, Popeye, we've had one revelation after another coming from Mr. Snowden. Just, I'm interested in knowing what your personal feelings are about ordinary members of the public being tracked like this using their smartphones.
Well, it's just a total abuse of power, but it's not like, A, nobody saw this coming, and B, we haven't been telling people this for years.
That's true.
We can just say, told you so. I mean...
That's very true, yeah.
Right? Like, we're not conspiracy theorists. We're conspiracy factualists. This is the truth. There is a conspiracy. They're out to get you. It is the fact. Just stop being a baby about it. Look, it is real. I mean, the NSA is spying on you.
Yeah.
I said to my listeners, what they're doing is the digital equivalent of digging through your daughter's panty drawer. How would that make you feel? Because that's what they're doing. You dig through a 16-year-old girl's email, or through her digital diaries or whatever else they have that they're digging through. You dig through their phones and their texts. That's just as personal as going through your kid's underwear drawer. And you wouldn't tolerate that, so why is this okay?
It
shouldn't be.
That's right. I mean, the other revelation, of course, that came out a couple of months ago, which is absolutely mind-blowing, is that everything that people purchase on iTunes, Google Play, everything that they're uploading and downloading on YouTube and other Google-owned services, because YouTube isn't a separate company, it's actually owned by Google. Microsoft and, all of these other household digital brands, some were actually cooperating with the NSA. Others were, they came out and they said, well, we don't know about this program. And the program is called PRISM, PRISM, P-R-I-S-M. And this is a revelation from Mr. Snowden. As soon as he escaped his predicament in Hong Kong and he arrived in Russia, the PRISM revelations really basically show us that, when you use these big household brands, online brands like Facebook, some of those companies are actually collaborating in passing on your personal info. Now, we've got 900 million people on Facebook. 900 million. That is almost a seventh of the planet's entire population. And then we've got Google. Now, Google, it's a bit like, the old battle between VHS and Betamax. Betamax cassettes gave you a better picture, but VHS was in the market first. And Google, they had their search engine running long before other people. And there's, search engines which are much more sophisticated that do great things. I mean, for example, Bing Video Search is an amazing thing because you can just hover your mouse over a video clip. You don't have to download it, and the video clip will play, and it saves a lot of time. It's a lot easier than some of the solutions that you've got on Google, in my opinion. And basically, VHS won out over Betamax, not because it was better, just because it was first in the market. Where has Google got one of its most important offices on the planet? Buckingham Palace Road. Is that just a coincidence? I suppose they'll kid me that it is, but I don't believe that. And, many of these...
Oh, Chris, stop it. It's just a coinky dink.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. But, a lot of these bosses of these household online brands now, they don't even know who owns their companies because they went onto the stock markets. And, of course, a lot of the shares are bought anonymously. They're bought by shell companies. Now, coming back to Mr. Snowden with this PRISM software that is basically... it's tracking online transactions. It's tracking the money. It's tracking who's paying, for example, Apple for a certain product. This is amazing. I suppose it falls into the category of industrial espionage. Can you imagine being able to sit back, watching this amazing amount of information flowing through? There's something like 350,000 movies purchased on iTunes every 24 hours and about 800,000 TV shows. Can you imagine sitting back and looking at all of this information, and then you have the financial resources of Her Majesty's government? Can you imagine how they can manipulate stocks and shares, and they can actually buy into companies that have got popular products? I mean, this is amazing stuff. It really is. By the way, the most popular TV show on iTunes in terms of purchases is a British show called Doctor Who, which is actually produced by the BBC. And who appoints the directors of the BBC? It's Her Majesty's government. I mean, all of this is interrelated in a very profitable way.
Just look up Jane Stanley and the BBC and Building 7.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. She's the reporter that reported Building 7. Yeah, what a, we call that a cock-up in British colloquial language.
Whoops.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Now, this Ed Snowden thing, Popeye, I mean, what my impression, if I want to summarize my impression of what Mr. Snowden has revealed so far, and apparently we're just on the tip of the iceberg with his revelations, is that we, the people, are the enemy. They consider us the enemy. And why would they do that? Why do they consider just ordinary people with their smartphone who's going to buy a loaf of bread as a worthy target of spying? I mean, they must be completely and utterly paranoid.
Well, that's definitely part of it, and that a lot of that paranoia comes from the fact, and you've covered this in your work, that a lot of these people at the top are from these blood lineages.
Yes.
And they've inbred so many times that they're literally losing it, some of these people.
Well, that's right. We know that the old King George, and there's actually a movie about this king. It's called The Madness of King George, and it's a great film. And the cast is made up of members of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and it's a really fascinating, it's a historically accurate film, and you can see this guy is a complete loony. And he was suffering from, I think the condition is pronounced prophia. I might have the pronunciation wrong. But he's not the only one who's got, congenital medical conditions and weird things going on in his mind. Because, even today, look at the royal family that we have today in Britain. The Duke of Edinburgh is actually the Queen's cousin, and they're married and they've got children. David Cameron, the Prime Minister, is the cousin of the Queen. And then we have this ridiculous, almost mind-blowing but true situation where the old King John, who was he's the brother that everyone hated of King Richard. This King John is a member of the old British royal family, and through the direct lineage of King John, we've got something like every single US president has some kind of blood relation with King John. apart from, I think, maybe 2 presidents. What is going on? I mean, you know, the mathematical probability of that is not running into millions. It's not running into trillions. It's running into whatever comes after a trillion. I don't even know what comes after a trillion to 1.
Trechagillion or something like that.
It's something like that. I think it was the quintillion or something crazy. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, just this single fact alone, where every single US president, bar about 2 of them, is related to a particular king on the British throne, on the British lineage. I mean, what does that make of democracy? Obviously, democracy is a sham. This isn't democracy, ladies and gentlemen. This is a democratic dictatorship. And I tell you now, you know, I have these conversations with ordinary members of the public. I give talks in pubs and different places. You know, look at the situation with a cold, calm eye. What law can any American citizen name, and what law can any British citizen name that has been invoked and has become a real law that was instigated by a member of the public? Nothing. The answer is nothing. The public have no say whatsoever in the legislation, in all of these bills. It's amazing.
And, you know, you mentioned Facebook before.
Yeah.
I wanted to throw this out there before I forgot. As a way of stifling the conversation about all of this stuff that we're talking about,
yeah,
since they've gone public. See, back in the day, you used to share a Facebook post, and this information used to get spread out to whoever liked your Facebook page or followed you or whatnot. Now, it literally gets out to maybe like 10%, if that, between 5 and 10% of people. So, I mean, these people, not only are they monitoring you and watching and recording everything you do, including deleted posts, photos. Girls, if you take a selfie of yourself and it's in a bikini or your undergarments, think twice. That stuff's going to be on the internet forever.
Yes.
So we didn't have to think about that when I was a kid, because I come from a generation before this, you know. But think about that. Don't post stupid images of yourselves on the internet, because it never goes away. Once it's out there and you upload it, doesn't matter if you delete it, it's on a server somewhere, and guaranteed some scumbag pervert will throw it up and put it up on the internet.
That's very, very true. In actual fact, I read an article. It came from the Daily Telegraph about a year ago, and it showed that Facebook had actually taken some of the public money that they got during their launch, and they bought. They're not using ordinary conventional hard drives, you know, like the hard drives which we all have in our computers. They're using solid state, super fast, chip based. There's no moving parts in the memory. And they bought an enormous investment in, I mean, so much of, I mean, like the factories just like running to create these chips for Facebook. And apparently, I mean, this is what the article said, you cannot close you cannot delete an actual Facebook profile. You can only close it. And these giant memory banks that Facebook have got still retain all of the stuff which passed through your Facebook profile. It's quite amazing. I mean, personally, you know, I'm an optimist. You know, I am always an optimist. I always think that, okay, there's 7.3 billion of us, and yes, the royal political corporate elite are very clever. They are really intelligent people. I don't take any of that away from them. In a way, I admire how clever they are. But the numbers, the figures, the odds are against them. I mean, just consider it. You've got 7.3 billion people. About 2.5 billion people are living below the poverty line. And when I'm talking about below the poverty line, I'm talking about people who can't afford to buy a pair of shoes, let alone the latest iPhone. Those 2.5 billion people are so busy trying to get something to eat, that they do not pose any political threat to the royal political elite, the corporate political elite. Then we have Mr. Snowden. He had the bad time in Hong Kong, and then he managed to find a home for himself where he's holding court now. And you've got the Washington Times, the London Guardian. You've got all the big journalists going there, and he's in Russia now. And the figures seem to suggest that if you're not living in the middle of a desert with wearing nothing on your feet, then you are a target to be spied on. It's just amazing. The cost of this spying is also something which the mainstream media have failed to actually investigate. If you're going to track 5 billion smartphones, yes, there's going to be clever technology, there's going to be clever software there, which is what Mr. Ed Snowden has actually revealed. But no software writes itself. Every single application, it doesn't matter what that is, requires maintenance. And I think what's going to come out of this is not only are trillions of dollars being wasted on wars which are engineered and are designed to take the fittest and the youngest people from society and actually blow their limbs off or even just kill them in some battlefield of an engineered war. What we are on the edge of right now, ladies and gentlemen, through the revelations of Mr. Snowden, is a new financial bottomless pit of money that must have been made available to fund this global surveillance society.
It does cost a lot of money, man. Look at like one of the chatters said in the chat room, Utah data center. I mean that, and I find it very ironic that place keeps having all sorts of issues. Like they're having like power surges and things are exploding and water issues and all sorts of. Maybe that's some divine power trying to tell us something.
Yeah, it could be. Is this the data center where the military? He comes from the military and he's the boss. And he had them design the control center so it looked like the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise. Have you seen those photographs?
Not on the inside, no, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, I've got listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. I've got photographs of one of these data collection centers, and the boss is a Pentagon officer. And these photographs of his control center were leaked out, and some architectural firm had been paid a huge amount of money, and it looks like the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise. And he's even got a exact kind of Captain Kirk swivel chair with all the buttons on the arms, and where, Mr. Zulu sits there, and, where they fly the Enterprise and they've got all those buttons. It looks exactly like that. These people are megalomaniacs.
Exactly. People wonder why we have issues.
Absolutely. I mean,
we have huge children. We have children inside of men's bodies running things, and they're spoiled, little evil, nasty. If anybody's ever seen the HBO show Game of Thrones, we have Joffrey running things. That's great.
Absolutely.
It's just ridiculous. And by the way, let me so people understand something. I know people go, well, I don't understand how it could be a vast global thing. We have all these different religions. None of these people are what they say they are. They're fake Jews, fake Christians, and fake Muslims, fake whatever else they pretend to be, Scientologists. Okay, they all worship Satan. In fact, Chris has one of the most interesting pieces of audio I've ever heard in my life. He's played it on my show before, where it was from the Ordo Templi Orientis, I think it was, and they were trying to invoke Tiamat, and while they were doing it, they were talking to, if I remember correctly, Enki, one of the Anunnaki.
That's right. That's right.
That should show you who these people, what they believe in and who they worship. They're not who they say they are. So you need to pay attention to this information because all this stuff is true. including the alien stuff.
In actual fact, me and Popeye, we will be doing a Christmas special broadcast. And what I'll do, Popeye, is I'll find that recording because it's pretty long, and we've only broadcast a few seconds of it on a previous show, and it is really spooky, and it is actually real as well. I mean, we're not making this stuff up. There are these cults, and they are invoking Tiamat, which is a deity basically associated with chaos, destruction, disease, pandemics, plague. And, they're calling these spirits through. Now, you may be, one of these people that stumbles on this broadcast. You might be stumbling on this in a year in the future, and you might be thinking, wow, Popeye and this Chris guy, they're talking about really weird stuff. This is real. What we're telling you about JFK assassination with the mafia, it goes so deep that you couldn't even make this stuff up. That's how deep it goes. And, these cults, the Ordo Templi Orientis, is actually a German cult. And I've got news for everyone. Okay. The Skull and Bones Brotherhood is also German. All right. The Skull and Bones Ivy League fraternity, which is not just at Yale, but it also exists at Princeton and a few other places as well. That is actually inspired by German fraternities, German brotherhoods, German student secret societies. And yes, they do lay in coffins, and yes, their members have been seeded into positions, very, very influential positions of government. I'm talking about presidents, I'm talking about vice presidents, and I'm talking about secretaries of state. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, John Kerry, Secretary of State, is a current member of Skull and Bones, and he won't even talk about it on air. Okay, we've got a little break coming up. There's a very short 90-second break. Stay with us. When we get back, we're going to be talking about Chinese plutonium reactors on the moon. Broadcasting globally from London, England, this is the Chris Everard Show on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. My special guest is Mr. Popeye from federaljack.com, and we are going to change gear right now. Just settle down, everyone, because what we're going to discuss now in the last part of this show is very, very serious indeed. The most toxic and poisonous substance known to man is man-made. It's called plutonium. 9 pounds in weight of plutonium dust, if that was sprinkled into the Earth's atmosphere, it would poison and kill almost instantaneously every living creature on our planet. Plutonium is a wholly man-made substance. It does not exist in nature. Plutonium is a synthesized, purified form of uranium. Uranium does exist in nature. And it's called plutonium because Pluto is associated, it's a deity associated with warfare, death, and chaos. Plutonium. 9 pounds of plutonium dust can kill every living creature on this planet. Now, the mainstream media have been reporting on this Chinese mini rover that's been sent to the lunar surface. Thank our lucky stars it's got up there. It's actually on the lunar surface right now. What the mainstream media never told us is that it contains plutonium inside that lunar rover. If that rocket had exploded, and rockets have exploded on the launch pads many, many times, if that rocket had exploded, plutonium would have been spread all over China. If it had exploded when it was at, say, 95,000 feet, leaving our atmosphere, that would have spread plutonium all over our entire planet. Now, it's safely on the surface of the moon. This rover has got a weird name. It's called the Jade Rabbit. and it landed in a part of the moon. It's called something like the Bay of Iridium or the Bay of Rainbows. It contains plutonium. It's going to be trundling around the lunar surface for the next year. When it's done its job, it's just going to stop. And unfortunately, that plutonium that's on board is going to stay radioactive on the lunar surface for the next 15,000 years.
That's great. So if David Icke is right and reptiles do live on the moon, they're going to get really pissed that we're leaving our radioactive trash.
Well, that is absolutely true. Yeah, it's very, very serious.
How arrogant are we as humans? I mean, we use depleted uranium and spread that around in weapons. Now we're throwing satellites out into outer space. What happens, like you said, what would happen if one of these things burned up?
Terrible.
We'd be done for.
We would. And you know what? We wouldn't know anything about it. Why? Because the mainstream media don't tell you this type of detail. We would, if that thing had burnt up, you know, like the Challenger, and there's loads of rockets that have been sent up, and they've, you know, got halfway up, going through the atmosphere. You got turbulence, you got cloud, you got moisture, you got ice crystals. A lot of things can go wrong with rocket launches. I can tell you that now. We wouldn't have known anything about it. All of a sudden, we'd be coughing. All of a sudden, we'd have blood coming from our tear ducts. Our tongues would start bleeding. We'd think, what on earth is going on with me? You'd look around, your family, your friends, your pets would also be bleeding from their eyes. And within a very short time, we would have very horrible, painful deaths. That is plutonium. That is radiation sickness. And to run this risk is, for me, it's just totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
Well, you know, I used to say to myself, like, what is wrong with these people? And I know a lot of people say this now. They'll say, well, you know, I don't understand how they chemtrail stuff because, you know, they would poison themselves and blah, blah, blah. Well, you got to put it into perspective, and this put it into perspective for me a very long time ago, when I understood and realized the true fact, that when they lit off when the scientists here in the United States lit off the first U.S. atomic bomb, not the first atomic bomb Germany had at first, but that's a different story. Anyway, when they lit it off out in the desert in New Mexico, those scientists were convinced that they were going to ignite the atmosphere.
That's right.
And there was at least half of them were convinced they were going to destroy the planet, and
That's
they did
right.
it anyway. They just
That's
went,
right.
screw it.
Yeah, they did. They did. I'll just, this is absolutely true, ladies and gentlemen. What Popeye's just said is absolutely true. This is in the autobiographies and the biographies of some of the members of the Manhattan Project, right up to the point where they exploded the first atomic bomb out at Los Alamos. Right up to the point of the countdown, they had slide rules and they had notepads, and they were trying to work out whether the heat from the explosion would set off a chain reaction and it would incinerate every single nitrogen and hydrogen atom in the Earth's atmosphere. And just as Popeye just said, they went ahead and did it anyway. After that bomb had exploded, there was a really amazing television interview with the boss, Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer, who was the boss of the Manhattan Project, and he quoted from these Indian Vedic, these very, very ancient Vedic texts from India. The Vedas are actually the oldest written texts from the Indian subcontinent. The Rig Veda is arguably one of the, I think it might even be the oldest written text in the world. And the Vedas are very interesting. If you're bored, I mean, I'm a person, I never get bored, but if you are bored and you want something fascinating to look at, do a little bit of research into the Vedas, Vedas. You will see in these ancient texts that they had atomic weapons that were so powerful. This is all the different factions, the enemies of each other in these histories. This is a history of, thousands of years ago, written into these very ancient texts. They had weapons that were so powerful that they could turn sand into glass, which is exactly what happened in the Los Alamos region, where the Trinity bomb went off. The sand turned into green glass. Now, in Libya, there is a huge area of the Libyan desert in North Africa, and it is not sand. You start driving in a Land Rover over it, and all of a sudden you start hearing crunching, and you look down, and you're no longer driving in sand, you're driving on green glass. Something happened in Libya a long time ago. So long ago, we do not know when it happened. Some heat source was so incredible, so intense, that it turned an enormous area of the northern Saharan desert in Libya into green glass. And it's actually called it's called LGG. The actual stuff is called LGG. It stands for Libyan green glass. What happened on Mars? Okay, I mean, look at the pictures of Mars. We just had, data coming through just in this last week, where the rover up there, the Curiosity rover, which cost $2 billion, by the way, it's an enormous rover. It's much bigger than people think it is. It's about 11.5 feet long. Cost $2 billion. It went into a flat area. The data came back, and it confirmed just a few days ago that the area that the Curiosity rover is in right now used to be flooded with water. Where has that Martian atmosphere gone? It is one of the biggest whodunit mysteries in the cosmos. How have we got a situation where the planet next door to us is now a desert planet that used to have canals and rivers and lakes? Doesn't make sense. Something very, very wrong happened on Mars, and it completely blasted the entire Martian atmosphere away. And I really wonder, when I look at these ancient texts, they say that we had flying machines, we had weapons that were powerful enough to turn a solid piece of granite into a block of glass. I'm wondering whether these ancient texts are actually describing what was going on Mars. Because something weird happened, something so incredibly important that it actually created a planetary catastrophe. Now, coming back to this jade rabbit that just, landed on the moon from China, if that had blown up in our atmosphere, that could have also ended up being an atomic event in our upper atmosphere. These people are, as far as I'm concerned, these people are not functioning using common sense or compassion for fellow human beings. There is something desperately wrong, people. Especially considering that they could use an alternative power source instead of plutonium. Plutonium! I mean, come on, use fuel cells, use anything, but don't put plutonium in a rocket and blast it up there and then leave it on the moon so that it's sitting there for the next 15,000 years. You can't go near this little rover because it's like a mini nuclear reactor. This is serious stuff.
Made by the Chinese.
Well,
who can't make drywall. Okay. So they haven't, obviously they can't make quality drywall or anything else, and they put what is it, melamine or whatever in their milk, and you let them put a nuclear reactor on the moon. That's just awesome.
Amazing. It's amazing. I mean, you couldn't make this up. All right, This is verbatim, and you can double check this, ladies and gentlemen. If you type into any search engine plutonium jade rabbit, it will come up. You know, I'm not making this stuff up. So, you know, I mean, I just think that to pollute a planet, because the moon is like a mini planet. I mean, thank our lucky stars we have the moon. I mean, look at the surface of the moon. It's just pockmarked with thousands and thousands of asteroid hits. It acts like a Hoover. You know, Comet Ison, Apophis, all of these really dangerous comets that we've had coming near us. You know, we are so lucky to have the moon the size it is because, you know, when those comets come close to us, the gravitational force of the moon usually makes those asteroids and comets veer off and go towards the moon, and they hit the moon rather than hitting Earth. You only have to take one look. Go to Google Earth, go to the meteor crater in Arizona. Look at the damage that thing caused. There's another huge crater impact underneath the sea in the Gulf of Mexico. In actual fact, my personal analysis that, you know, I've been studying this for a long time. I studied astronomy. I studied astronomy at the University of Greenwich in London. My personal analysis of this is that the Gulf of Mexico is shaped the way it is because, you know, some kind of comet or asteroid blasted in there. That could well be the place that, you know, had a detrimental effect on our atmosphere many millions of years ago. Maybe that was, you know, what caused all of these amazing dinosaurs to die out. Now, why are they up there? This is the other thing. Why have we got rovers going to Mars? Why have we got another rover from Japan going to a moon of Mars? Why have we got the Chinese sending a rover to the moon? It comes down to money. They are looking for valuable minerals. They're looking for gold. They're looking for titanium. They're looking for platinum. They're looking for anything that they can make money out of. If one of these rovers finds anything that's valuable, that planet, that moon, wherever they've sent that rover, I can tell you now, it's going to be like something out of the movie Alien, where we're going to have cargo ships, you know, with automated mining machines, with no public oversight, no ecological organization taking care of looking after these planets and these moons. And they're just going to be raping these planets. And who runs these space programs? The communist Chinese government. I mean, they're going around on a shopping spree right now. They're buying areas of Australia. Get this. The Chinese government just bought an area of Australia. The piece of land is 70 miles by 110 miles. You know, they just bought that. Now, you know, people are saying, oh, it's amazing. The Chinese, they're buying everything. They're buying, you know, land in Texas. They're buying everywhere. It's amazing. But then take it.
They're building like a Chinese city in Utah, I think it is. It's like 1 or 2 square miles, and it's literally going to be considered Chinese sovereign territory within the walls of the city.
Wow.
Yeah, that's nice.
Wow. Well, let's just take this one step further, okay? It's well known. We've seen it in the London Times. We've seen it reported in The Guardian. We've seen it reported in the Washington Post. We've seen it reported in the Financial Times, especially from London, that these purchases are happening. Vast tracts of land being purchased. But, again, like we said right at the very beginning of this show, that mainstream media report doesn't go deep enough. Let's take it to the next level. Who are the Chinese government paying the money to? Who owns that piece of land in Australia that is 70 miles by 110 miles? It's owned by Buckingham Palace. That's why that area of Australia is called Queen's Land, because that is the land of the Queen.
She's so evil.
Well,
I know some people in the UK get like all upset when you bash the Queen, but that woman, like, how do you not look at her? How do people look at her and go, "Oh, the Queen, Mom"? And no, how do you look at her? Look at her. She's evil. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm an American and we just, we're raised to dislike the British royalty or whatnot. But jeez, man.
Well, everyone's entitled to their opinion, Mr. Popeye, and I know a lot of people who agree with you. Like,
I wouldn't want to get close to her, dude. I'd be afraid she'd suck my soul out.
Well, there you go. I mean, there's rumors about that as well, but yeah. I mean, everyone, you must think about these things. I mean, if you're one of these newbie people who've just stumbled on, the types of subjects which me and Mr. Popeye have been discussing in this show, welcome to reality. We are not talking about pie in the sky nonsense. Everything that we've discussed in this show is real. And the other interesting thing that I have to say about this is that in the Financial Times, this is going back about 18 months ago, it was about a year and a half ago that I first started seeing mainstream media reports about the Chinese communist government, the communists, actually being allowed to buy huge tracts of land. It was about a year and a half ago that I became aware of it. And I remember reading the Financial Times, and they're buying that land on leases for 125 years. So they're paying vast amounts of money to Buckingham Palace. They get the land for 125 years. At the end of the 125 years, Buckingham Palace own the land again. It's amazing. I mean, what is going on? I mean, the McCarthy era, we had people, great American entrepreneurs like Howard Hughes, being exposed, if you like, or interviewed on live TV. We had lots of other celebrities on TV. This is only, this is, 35 years ago. We had big name, household names from Hollywood being questioned on live American TV, going across all three networks. Are you a communist? Do you support the communist regime? Have you ever visited Moscow? Have you ever been to Peking? Do you know any Chinese people? Do you know any Russian people? I'm not making this up. This really happened. And now, like Mr. Popeye has just said, vast tracts of land are being sold to the communists. The Chinese government has not changed. Okay? The Chinese government is still a communist government. And one of the biggest selling books in the whole world, or one of the biggest distributed books in the whole world, is Chairman Mao's Little Book. These people believe in this communist ideal, which is, of course, fake communism, because the leaders, and this has just come out this week through the People Power movement in Ukraine, Putin, who, comes from the communist regime before Glasnost, he's got $40 billion in a bank account. The Chinese leaders, they get driven around in limos, even though everyone's meant to be equal. This is, this is such a mind control scam. Look at those military parades in North Korea. What you are witnessing there is propaganda, but don't just think that North Korea is the only place that does those military parades for propaganda purposes. It happens in London. It happens all over the world. The British royal elite have the lifeguards and the trooping of the colour and those great big tall stupid hats made out of bear skin and bear fur. That's also propaganda. But you see, when it's done in Britain...
Wait, hold up.
Yeah.
Wait. Those hats are made out of bear fur?
Yeah.
this from the same people that, oh my God, we have to save the animals of the planet because of global warming.
Yeah, that's nonsense, you see.
Right, like, talk about talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, we have to save the bears so we can hunt them.
Now, listen, you're 1,000% correct, because Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, has been, for a large portion of his life, associated with the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And yet, he goes out shooting animals. I mean, get this, everyone, okay? And this is a dichotomy. It's a paradox. You know, these people are not the types of characters that you think they are. When you see all the school children there with the Union Jacks waving their flags, oh, there's a royal baby, and there's all the, soldiers marching up and down in their red tunics, yeah, that's called tradition. It's called heritage. That's just what Britain is like. But if people in, say, for example, Iran have, they're waving Iranian flags and they've got their military all marching. Oh, that's propaganda. How dare they have nuclear weapons? Get this right, everyone, okay? Nearly everything that you've been taught by the mainstream media has made you think wrong. I know that sounds big-headed. I don't want to come across as a person who, I don't want to put myself on a pedestal and say, oh, you silly people, you've all been duped. I know people who read the articles like you find on federaljack.com, and, watch my documentaries. I know people that come to this knowledge, but their ego is so big and it's so ingrained into their character that they are unable to accept that all of their lives they have been lied to. And so they reject people like Mr. Popeye, they reject me, and some of them are really nasty, they send me a death threat on Twitter more than once. And it's really sad. And, this is the situation where we're in right now. So we're coming up to the end of the show now, Mr. Popeye. It's gone by very quick, hasn't it?
Yeah, man. Every time I'm on with you, Chris, it just goes by, bam.
It's true. Now we're going to do a Christmas broadcast, Mr. Popeye. Do you want to tell them, tell the listeners, the dates?
We're going to do it Friday, December 27th, 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard. So I guess on Chris's network is Pacific, so I'm on 3 hours before, so it's 7 to 9 Pacific.
Okay,
but it's 2 days after Christmas, December 27th. It'll be like a special holiday info overload.
Well, I think what we're going to do, I'm going to bring along the Tiamat ceremony recording, because this is from deep inside a Brotherhood, which is a very rare recording. It's the verbatim recording of a weird, loony, satanic cult.
Creepy.
And we will have a classic. What we're going to do is we're going to have a classic, creepy, satanic, ghost story type Christmas special broadcast. How about that?
Ooh, sounds good to me.
Now, Mr. Popeye, thank you so much for being a guest. You can catch up with Mr. Popeye's news stories at federaljack.com, and you can send me death threats on Twitter at christophereverard.com. Thank you very much. Hopefully I'll be here next week if I'm not assassinated. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.